Now in today's video we're going to have a look at everything you ever wanted to know about sowing seeds, whether they're indoor sowing or outdoor sowing. Have you ever wondered why we actually sow indoors? Those are the kind of questions we're going to answer in this video. Now, but first we're going to have a look at what kind of materials you can use. These bags I got from the garden centre. They are organic. They're not organically certified, but they're actually just made with organic material, meaning that they don't have any chemicals whatsoever in it. I checked on the back. So I'm kind of happy with that. It's a happy compromise I'm going to do, especially because I don't actually have any compost at the moment, my homemade compost. Now there's two different ones. We have our potting compost and we have our sowing compost. The only difference is one has more nitrogen, and the one that has more nitrogen is going to be the potting compost. So you don't want to actually use that for sowing, because if it has too much nitrogen in it, the actual little seedlings will become way too straggly. Tendency will be they might fall over, and you don't want that. So you don't want weak plants. Even though they have more nitrogen in it, they make them more weak. Just wait for that car to pass by. Now the other thing you can use, of course, is you can get certified organic kind of compost. I couldn't find any at the moment. I'm new here to Switzerland, so I'm still sourcing some. But you can also, of course, make your own compost. And next year, hopefully, I'll have my own compost. I can actually mix it with sand to make it not as rich, because, as you know, your own compost is going to be 10 times richer than even this potting compost. So we want to add some sand to it so we can actually use it for sowing. There's one more thing that you can actually use, and that is just using plain old soil. But the only problem with it is it's going to have millions of weeds in it, and the way around that is you can actually bake them in an oven if you wanted to at about 100 degrees, and that kills all the seeds, and then you can actually use it as potting soil, or a sowing compost as well. And you don't have to mix any sand or anything to it. But for most people that's not reasonable. You're not going to stick it in your oven. If you have a cob oven, it might be reasonable, which you can actually build. Check out one of my videos. And that's pretty much all we need to know about the different kind of composting materials. Now, one more thing that you can use is a thing called vermiculite. It's a kind of a mineral type thing. It's kind of a grain sized thing that expands as you add water to it. Mix it in with your sowing compost at about 30%. Especially if you're in a hot climate, you don't have to water as often and your seedlings don't dry out so fast. One more thing I wanted to say as well is don't use, these are free of kind of any peat in it. And peat is found in bogs. Bogs provide a lot of different life for rare species, and I really find it a shame that people are still buying peat in their compost or even burning it. So try to avoid that as well. Now, before we actually get into the whole sowing of trays, I wanted to talk a little bit about the trays themselves. Some important facts about it, and exactly what kind of plants need kind of what different sizes. There's a very simple way of remembering. I will talk about that now. But first, try to get these kind of hard plastic trays. I know it's plastic, but at the same time, these will last 10 years or so. Bit expensive. They're about €5 roughly each tray. Do wash them every 2 or 3 years with boiling water if you can, because you don't want to kind of spread the diseases onto the next generations. Usually it's okay. I've never really had a problem, but some people have told me they had problems with it, so I'm just saying it because of that. Now, the other thing is these kind of pots. I find them very good because, first of all, they're free. You can get them in most garden centres. People just kind of give them away. They don't last as long, maybe 3 years. Of course, you have different sizes as well. You have also 2 different sizes in this kind of tray. And basically these are only good for lettuces, so don't get too many of those unless you want to grow a lot of lettuces, but mainly these are made for lettuces. These kind of pots, usually I would use things like cucumber, anything from the pumpkin family would go in there, also tomatoes. The smaller kind of pots I would use things like peas, and mainly peas. I would put 2 peas in there, and that would be my peas done. But everything else that you could possibly think of, sweet corn, brassicas, any kind of beetroot, spinaches, all the other kind of vegetables, you can actually use this tray, which is roughly that size. I can't tell you what size it is. It's about 7 centimeters by 7 centimeters by 7, something like that. You don't have to be too exact on that. Now, the only things that you really want to sow outside are that you have to sow outside directly in the place where they're going to be any kind of deep-rooted, tap-rooted kind of vegetables, carrots, anything of the Umbrelliferae family, if I'm saying that right, which is the parsnips, even fennel, things like that that make a long taproot. So that's something you have to sow outside. Don't sow them into trays, because when you actually transplant them again, you are more likely to disturb the root and you're going to have problems that way. Wow, it's hot. Beautiful weather. Okay, so that's pretty much concludes that. If you have any questions on that, please do ask. Oh, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that's a cold frame is a great way of growing indoors. This has kind of 3 different trays inside a kind of a tray of thing with a plastic thing cover. It's a mini kind of clutch, and I think they're okay, a little bit of a waste of plastic, but also they last a long time. And you can actually use them if you want to do a bit of sowing indoors. If you don't have a mini clutch, like I showed you in the last video how to make a compost seeder clutch, or a mini glass house, or even a glass house or polytunnel, you can actually use these. Now, don't put it onto a kind of a windowsill that is facing east-west. Definitely no point putting it on a north-facing. Actually, don't even try any of those 3 directions. Only south-facing will work. Also, even if you have south-facing, make sure that you turn it every day or so. Also, you can put a kind of a mirror thing behind it. You can use aluminium foil glued onto a bit of cardboard, and that then reflects the sunlight back onto the seedlings. Otherwise they get very straggly as well and all pointing in one direction, and you would be just wasting your time. Just a little note on that. Right, we'll sow a bit of seeds, and that's what we're going to do now. I have a selection here of different seeds actually that I'm going to sow, some of them outside, some of them inside. First thing I'm going to actually start off is with the lettuce. Now, my sowing compost is nice and fine. That also makes things a little bit easier. Make sure you have some kind of board here so you don't waste all the compost. You want to kind of just throw it on there and crumble it up a bit, just like a heap on there. And then all you got to do is spread it out, and you don't have any problem with soil compaction when you have just compost. Compost very rarely actually can compact, so you want to cram in there as much as possible, because you want to have as much of nutrients in there and as much of compost in there as possible. So I always tend to press it down nicely. I use my fingers like this. I find the fastest way. Also, to make holes, I don't have anything against it, by the way, if you want to take loads of time and really use kind of techniques like that, but I just find it, especially if you're doing a lot of trays, sometimes I used to do 100 trays, and I just found, let's do it fast, because I don't have so much time. Anyway, this is the lettuce. Now, I can do maybe 2 trays of lettuce, but I can also split them up. I don't have to do an entire kind of tray of the same type of lettuce. I want to have different types of lettuce, just looks lovely in the salad. But also I'm doing, of course, the seed saving project, where I'm trying to save different types of seeds. So we have here a Kopfsalat, which is German. We have the oak leaf salad, and also we have a Lolo Rosa. So these are the 3 different salads I'm going to be sowing today. So I want to kind of roughly have enough plants that I have enough to eat, and also enough for seed saving. I need 15 plants for seed saving each, and I also want to eat maybe 30 plants. So I'm going to sow maybe a third of each. So I'm just going to use 2 trays for that. So here's one. And the great thing as well is, if you keep the seed packets, especially if they have a nice picture on the top, you usually will be able to know what you actually have by just looking at it, because I like marking things, but I find it's better to have a record somewhere else, especially if you're doing seed saving, because tendency will be somebody's going to just come along and take your sign away. It's happened so many times, and that's a big problem for me anyway. So anyway, what I would do then is do the same again, press it in, and you do the same thing with all the other kind of trays as well. It's a very, very simple way of doing it. Spread it again, and then we make the holes for the actual seeds. Now I'm going to put about 3 seeds in each one, like that. And remember, I'm using the right size for the lettuce. Clean it up a bit. Now only about 2 to 3 seeds of lettuce per hole, that's all you actually really need. And try to keep them all in a block, as so that you actually know which ones are which. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which makes it a little bit more tricky. So I'm going to do 6. There's a 9 and 9, 18 divided by 3 is 6. Now I'm starting on my Kopfsalat. I've done the oak leaf, I've done 6, and I've done 3 Lola Rosa, 3 Lola Rosa, and now I'm going to do 6 Kopfsalat, and then we know exactly, I'll have enough for each one that I can plant out later. It's going to take about, let's say about a month for these to grow into big enough sizes that I can start hardening them off. That means actually that I just have to take them out of the cold frame. With this thing which I built in the last video, you can actually just open the actual windows and harden your plants off that way. Hardening off your plants just means that you every day you kind of acclimatize them to the outside condition a little bit longer. So first day might be an hour, then second day might be 2 or 3 hours, and then 4 hours, and then 5 hours, eventually leaving them outside overnight. Make sure that they're not on the grass, on the lawn, because generally speaking slugs will come and start munching them, so that's not what you want to do. And then you can actually just transplant them out into their permanent position, and generally speaking they will be much larger and way better able to cope with any kind of predators, and they will also have been started off a little bit earlier. Now we'll talk a little bit about the difference between actually sowing indoors and outdoors. Sowing indoors means just that you actually, generally speaking, start things off earlier, but you can actually sow pretty much everything outside in the garden. It's maybe a little bit more practical. This is a lot of work actually starting things off earlier, but you do have a higher rate of losses. So what I would suggest to you, for instance, here I have this carrot. I've got 25 grams of carrot seed, and I'm going to sow really thickly. I always sow my carrots or anything I'm sowing outside, I always sow 2 or 3 times as much. I can thin them later, there's no problem, but the slugs usually do a good job at thinning my plants anyway, so I would suggest to you, try to sow more seeds if you're going to sow outside. Okay, now the next thing to do, very simple, you put your seeds in. I generally try to take the soil that is here, and I just spread it on top. I rub it on like that. Now with brassicas, if you're going to sow with brassicas, you're going to sow maybe 3 seeds as well, but you would actually thin them out with a bit of scissors. You just leave 1. With lettuce, it's not that important. I tend to just plant 3 seeds and I get 3 plants, and I tend to get a nice big kind of area covered with it. I find it doesn't matter so much. Now we're going to talk a bit about actually sowing in pots. First thing I want to say is you can use potting compost for just sowing into pots, because most of the things that you're going to sow into pots are going to have quite a thick stem, so they're not going to tilt over, they're not going to have a problem with too much nitrogen. What you would do is you would try to again fill in as much as possible. I find it's very easy just to put the pot in the bag and then cram in as much as possible again. And what you would also do is the tendency is that most seeds that are big tend to be flat, so you have your sunflowers, your broad beans, your courgette plants, except for the peas, which are round. You want to make sure that you actually plant it on the edge, because otherwise if you plant it like this, a drop can actually, or a bit of moisture can actually go on top of there and rot the seed. This is an old broad bean variety. I used to eat this when I was a kid, so I'm actually growing it because I want to keep it going. And it's actually, what it is I'm still doing the whole kind of seed saving thing. So do go over to heirloomseedsaving.com, where you can actually share your heirloom varieties of seeds with other people for free, or you can actually just ask, or you write them and people will actually just share seeds with you, and that's the idea of the website, so check it out. Now I've done that one. Generally speaking, I do actually plant pretty much everything in glass houses, but I'm actually running out of, I don't have much space here, as you can see, so I'm just going to do the ones that I really need to do, that I really have to do. That's the courgettes, pumpkins, cucumber. I have this kind of pumpkin trial thing that I'm doing. It's actually breeding, a bit of breeding program thing I'm doing, just trying out, just for a bit of fun. Broad beans, and I have this Aztec black sweet corn, which I think is a bit cool as well. I'm going to do that as well. So that's all there is to it in pots, and sowing in trays. Same thing with these in between ones for the brassicas and so on. Use again 3 seeds, but with the brassicas, as I said, just cut away most of them, just leave one to become straw. Now we have peas. That's what we're going to be sowing today outside. I'm also going to do carrots and a few other things as well. In the entire video, in the next series, I'm going to show you basically how far apart plants need to be, different gardening techniques and so on. So stay tuned for those. But what we're doing here today is we are going to use these cages. They're all compost cages, ideal for growing peas up because they have these fine wires which the peas can actually kind of hook around. These are kind of old varieties. This is a Kapuziner Erbse, which is like translated nasturtium pea, and this is a kind of a Monch 2 kind of sugar snap pea, old variety. It grows 2 meters tall, so they're going to come over here, but they're going to fall down over it, which I find quite nice as well. I'm doing this, of course, as always, for seed saving as well, so that's my aim. You can plant them about 5 centimeters apart, either on the inside or the outside, depending on if you want to protect them or not. And that's pretty much it. That's what I'm going to do now. So I hope you enjoyed the video, learned something, and I'll see you next week.